Hello everyone, Shalom. This is Tom Thorne from Avdei El Elyon, Servants of the Most High God Ministries. We're going to be continuing in our series of the Hebrew roots of Old Testament passages today. In this lesson will be part 3 of our series on the Beatitudes. As you'll recall, in parts 1 and 2, we reviewed the word truth, and we went through Matthew 5, verses 1 through 7. In today's class, we're going to be looking at Matthew 5, verses 8 through 12. Now, once again, our strategy in this series is as follows. We're going to go through the verse in English. Secondly, we're going to go through the verse as translated into Hebrew by the Delitzsch Hebrew New Testament translation. Then thirdly, we're going to focus on key words and their Hebrew definitions. And we're going to take it like that. Now, of course, we're not doing this to rewrite the Bible or anything like that, to say that the translations that we're reading are all wrong and this and that. We're not doing that. We're just doing this to see if we can gain some additional understanding in these timeless New Testament passages. In our last class, I mentioned a little bit about the Hebrew language, verbal stems and conjunctions in particular. So before we proceed today, I'd like to give a very brief definition of verbal stems, so you have a little bit idea of what I'm referring to here. The first definition of the stems is as follows. The stem formation of a verb indicates both the kind of verbal action, which can be either simple, intensive, or causative, and the voice, which can be either active, passive, or reflexive of the verb. So let me repeat that once more. The stem formation of a verb indicates both the kind of verbal action and the voice of the verb. Now there are 7 major Hebrew stems. There's the kal stem, the nifal stem, the piel, the pual, the hifil, the hofal, and hithpael. For a brief definition of each of these stems, the kal stem expresses simple action with an active voice. For example, he heard would be simple action, active voice. The nifal stem expresses simple action with a passive voice. Or, for example, he was heard. The piel stem, on the other hand, expresses an intensive type of action with an active voice. For example, he broke, which would be simple action, would become he shattered. That would be a piel stem. The 4th major stem is what they call the pual stem, P-U-A-L. It expresses an intensive type of action with a passive voice. In other words, he shattered would become it was shattered. The 5th stem is the hifal stem. It expresses a causative type of action with an active voice. He heard would become he caused to hear. And the 6th stem is the hofal stem, which expresses a causative type of action with a passive voice. For example, he made someone king would become he was made king. And the last major verbal stem in the Hebrew language is what's known as the hithpael stem, which expresses an intensive type of action with a reflexive voice. In other words, he was holy becomes he sanctified himself. So those are the 7 major verbal stems in the Hebrew language, and I'll be referring to them periodically as we go on, as it is very important that we know the stems of the verbs that are used in many cases. As a short review of part 2 of our last class, we covered Matthew 5 verses 1 through 7, and we did a deep dive into the following keywords, such as blessed, poor in spirit, mourn, comforted, hunger and thirst for righteousness, and mercy. So that kind of brings us up to where we are. So let's move on and continue on, beginning with verse 8. Beginning with verse 8. Verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. In Hebrew that would be asharei Ba-re, la-vav, ki, hen, yihru, et Elohim. So the first key word in this verse, in my opinion, is the word heart. Blessed are the pure in heart. Heart comes from the Hebrew levav, which can mean either heart, mind, will, loyalty, disposition, etc. And Holliday's lexicon adds this phrase to their definition: am ready for an alliance with you. So if we take those different definitions and fill them in, it adds a little bit to this verse. We could say, blessed are the pure in heart. Or we could say, blessed are the pure in mind. Blessed are the pure in will. Blessed are the purely loyal people. Blessed are the pure in disposition. Blessed are the pure in attention to God's Word. I think that adds a little bit to the phrase, blessed are the pure in heart. The second key word of this verse, in my mind, was the word yiru, which is they see, or they will see. This being an imperfect conjugation, meaning an ongoing, something that's happening now or something that's happening in the future. This comes from the root word ra'ah. Now, a couple definitions of ra'ah are perceive, become aware of, know, enjoy looking at, see with concern. Now let's substitute those definitions once again for this word. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. For they shall see God, or for they shall perceive God. For they shall become aware of God. For they shall know God. For they shall enjoy looking at God. For they shall see with concern. For they shall see God with concern. I think those two alternate definitions of the words heart and see are very, very important. Add a little bit to this scripture. Okay, now let's move on to verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. This is one of the most famous verses in the Bible. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. In Hebrew, that would be Asharei, Rodfei, Shalom, Ki, B'nai, Elohim, Yikareu. Okay, so the first key word in this verse, in my mind, is the word peacemaker. Well, pursue. Peacemakers. In Hebrew, it's translated as those who pursue peace. Peacemakers is translated as those who pursue peace. So if we look at the word for pursue, that comes from the root word rodfei, or it comes from the word rodfei, which is the root word radaf. Now, this is a participle conjugation used here, meaning action, as in pursuing peace. Like a continual action, someone who's continually pursuing after peace. Blessed are they who are pursuing peace, for they shall be called the sons of God. That's kind of a nice charge for us, isn't it? To be pursuing peace all the time. The second key word of this phrase is, in my mind, is will be called. The keyword phrase is will be called. That comes from the word kara, or actually yikreu, the root word being kara. Now the kara, the definition of kara, an interesting definition of this word is to read aloud, proclaim, call, give a name to. So if I say, they shall be called the sons of God, or if I say, they shall be proclaimed as the sons of God, that possibly gives a little bit more emphasis to it. They shall be proclaimed as the sons of God. Blessed are those who are chasing after peace, for they shall be proclaimed to be sons of God. Just another way of looking at this verse. Okay, now let's move on to verse 10. Verse 10, blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In Hebrew, that would be Asherei ha-nirdafim, Biglal, ha-zedek ki lahem malkut ha-shamayim. Now the first key word in this verse, in my opinion, was the word persecuted. Blessed are those who have been persecuted. Now we saw a form of this word radaf earlier in verse 9. There are a few definitions for this word, which include pursue, set off after, push on, or persecute. And the second key word, in my opinion, was the phrase on account of. That's biglal, which means on account of. And the third key word is the word righteousness, zedek or ha-zedekah in the DLC, the Delitzsch Hebrew New Testament, and the root word being zedek. That word is translated as righteousness, blameless behavior, honesty. And Jeff Benner, in his ancient Hebrew lexicon, translates this as one who is upright or righteous is one who walks a straight path. That reminds us of the narrow gate, the narrow path, the narrow way that Yeshua spoke of in Matthew chapter 7. Now if we take a look at the ancient Hebrew alphabet for this word zedek, righteousness, the three letters are Zadi, Dalet, and Kaf. Now, if you look at the fourth letter down here, fourth letter down is Dalet. And the pictographic representation of that word is a door. And its meaning is either tent or doorway or open or pathway or move or things of that nature. Then the second letter is the letter Zadi, which is over here on the right-hand side, the seventh letter down. Now the pictographic representation of that word is a trail, and it can represent man on his side, chase, hunt, or journey. And the last letter is the word Kaf, which is the letter right below Zadi, which in pictorial form is the rising sun or the back of a head. And it can mean either behind, last, time, least, or cycle. So when we put these words, these original Hebrew pictographic alphabetic forms together, my inspiration was this: hunting, seeking, to enter the path that has been opened to us right behind Yeshua as a definition for righteousness. So the fourth key word in this verse, in my opinion, is for there is, or for to them is, and that's ki lahem, which is for to them is the kingdom of heaven. So when you put these four key words plus the definition, plus the alternate definitions of the word radfe, plus the examination we did into the word righteousness, I think that this verse could really be read in two different methods. The first is exactly the way it's translated. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I think an alternate way that this verse could be translated, and this is not in contradiction, this is just an alternate way that it could be translated, not in contradiction at all to the way we read it in most Bibles, but like this: blessed are they who are pursuing, chasing after, setting after, and pushing forward on account of righteousness, for to them is the kingdom of heaven. Or, on the other hand, they could both be correct. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, and blessed are those who are pursuing or chasing after righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, let's move on now to verse 11. Verse 11 reads, "Blessed are you when men cast insults at you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely on account of me." In Hebrew, this is a little bit harder verse to read, so have some patience with me, please. Hebrew, this Asharakem, ki yikarafu, v'radfu, etkem, v'dibru, alekem, v'sheker, kal, ra, v'eburi. Okay, so the first key word of this verse, in my opinion, is the word insults. Yakarfu. Blessed are you when men cast insults at you. Now that word can be translated as taunt, reproach, taunt or reproach. And once again, this is an imperfect conjugation indicating something that's happening now or something happening in the future. Now, to me, the imperfect conjugation is used more often than the perfect in the Beatitudes. Imperfect representing now or the future, whereas a perfect conjugation representing the past. So Yeshua is focusing more on, to me, is focusing more on what's happening now or what's happening in the future, not so much on what's happening in the past, with the assumption that we have already forgiven those that have insulted us in the past. Okay, so the second key word is the word, in my opinion, was the word persecute. That's v'radfu, persecute. That's the same word, radah, it's the same root word we found in verses 9 and 10. And now, I think in this instance, the word would mean persecute. The content here is much more likely to cause this word to mean persecute here than the other definitions, such as pursue or set after. So blessed are those who cast insults upon you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you. The third key word here in my mind was the keyword phrase was the word and say. That comes from the root, from the Hebrew v'dibru. And that, according to Holliday's lexicon, would be from the root word dabar. Now dabar would mean either word, matter, or deed. Word, matter, or deed. Or we could say action, too. So what this Hebrew word here might indicate is that Yeshua could have not only been saying those who say all kinds of evil against you, but also those who do all kinds of evil against you. Or he might have been saying those who say and do all kinds of evil against you. Or say or do all kinds of evil against you. So I think it's more than just saying, I think it's also doing. And the last key word here, in my opinion, was the word busheker, which is false, which is translated falsely here. Say all kinds of evil against you falsely on account of me. The word sheker, the root word sheker, means either lie, deception, or falsehood. So that could be referring to telling lies about you, spreading deceit about you, telling false stories about you, or of course it could be also could be doing these things falsely against you on account of me, on account of Yeshua. So let's move on now to verse 12. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. In Hebrew, this would be simku v'galu ki shakarkem rav b'shamayim ki kain radfu et ha-han-vi'im esher ha-u-havu lifnakem. Okay, the first key word here is the word simku, in my opinion. And that simku, the very first word, simku vigalu. Rejoice and be glad. Rejoice and be glad. Now this again is an example of this is an example, for the first time I should say, not again, but this is an example of an imperative conjugation. An imperative conjugation is used to express direct commands. It can also be used to grant permission or to communicate a request. I think Yeshua in this case is more than communicating a request to us. I think he's more than just asking us to rejoice and be glad. I think he's telling us to be rejoiced and glad when these things happen, not just suggesting it. In Colossians 1:24 we read, "Now I rejoice in my sufferings for you, and I fill up in my physical body, for the sake of his body, the church, what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ." So I think Jesus Yeshua is here telling us, rejoice and be glad when these things happen. They're going to happen, but your reward in heaven is great. Your reward in heaven is great, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now the second key word in my mind is the word vigilu. And that word is translated, according to Holliday's lexicon, as to shout with joy, shriek ecstatically. In other words, don't just be glad, but be glad. Don't just rejoice, but rejoice. Now I know this is quite a command from Yeshua, Jesus, to rejoice and be glad when people are speaking evil against us. But that's what he's telling us to do, because the prophets were treated in the same way. The great men of the Old Testament, the great men of the Bible were treated the same way. And the reward in heaven is great if we do so. So in conclusion to our review of Matthew 5, verses 1 through 12, the Beatitudes, there's often more than one way to translate the Hebrew text, and neither is necessarily wrong. By taking a look at different possible meanings for some key words in this landmark passage by Yeshua, plus throwing in little grammatical clarifications, I hope this has provided a little extra insight into what Yeshua was saying or could have been thinking during this classic sermon. I hope it has also provided some additional appreciation for the incredible Hebrew language. Our next class will be a class I have titled Names, a Story of Prophecy. In this class, we will take a look at how the Hebrew meanings of the names of 4 heroes of the Old Testament, when the meanings of these names are put together, they tell an incredible story and a prophecy. Then the warning that is also given to us by the meanings of these names, the warning that is given to us today. So have a good day, everyone. Baruch Hashem, praise the Lord. Yivarecha Yahweh, God bless you, and Shalom Yibrakot, peace and blessings.